This will be a debunk proving that Dems and Libs force acts of war 24/7. Pretty much I'm just going to read off a list of acts of war that I've seen because it's just all constant. And I could keep going and going after this list is done that I say, but I mean, what's the point? I think you'll get the message. Saying no to all of our orders is an act of war. Saying no to securing and defending our country, people, and cities is an act of war. Nearly 1,000 lawsuits in months over everything Trump does is an act of war. Taking repeated shots at our biggest and most cherished is an act of war. Threatening us nonstop and calling for more Kirks is an act of war. Iron at Charlie and all on the day before 9/11 were acts of war. Dems and Libs forcing evil anti-American BS and values down our throats daily is an act of war. Being tyrannical and defiling our rights, traditions, histories, and values are acts of war. Dividing and lying to Americans daily is an act of war. Releasing hardened criminals to kill again is an act of war. Enabling and helping crime, cartels, drugs, thievery, etc. it's awful and an act of war. Forcing ICE to remove their masks is an act of war. They have families. They're hunted by the cartels. They wear masks. You people are evil. Helping ICE and them to get targeted and for the criminals to evade law is an act of war. Running for mayor or a high position of power in this country as an openly anti-American socialist with whack values is an act of war to me, at least. Voting to intentionally harm and destroy America is an act of war. Grossly weaponizing and targeting political opponents for decades unfairly is an act of war and also is literal fascism. Holding us hostage with ridiculous demands while Americans suffer and don't get paid, like is seen with the shutdown, is an act of war. Killing Americans and our futures is an act of war. Constantly committing treason, sedition, fraud, and abuse is an act of war. Cussing us real Americans out while destroying America and rooting for our direct harm is an act of war. Cheating, rigging, and stealing elections is an act of war. Mocking Charlie and threatening Moore/his family are acts of war. Rooting for our direct harm and downfall is an act of war. I don't know if I said that one or not. Labeling us all Nazis or pedos who are a threat that needs stopped is an act of war. Base is another thing. I am proving a lot of this stuff about Dems. You guys just baselessly say BS without proof. Trying to stop a duly elected president is an act of war. Many times they did that. Insurrections and clashing nightly for months and months are actual acts of war. January 6th was not even an insurrection. You guys are like crazy compared. Don't even bring up January 6th to me. It was like a one-time thing that happened 6 years ago, dude. Let it go. Do you see you guys every day, 24/7 on a daily basis, en masse? Biden launching unauthorized strikes deep inside of Russia, bypassing Putin's nuclear thresholds is an act of war. Supporting illegals while putting us last is an act of war. Stealing from taxpayers and abusing us is an act of war. Sending memes with Charlie and his neck gushing out when I merely ask for a civil debate is an act of war. Labeling Christians as terrorists and comparing Christians to ISIS who chops off heads is an act of war. Trying to stop us from securing our borders is an act of war. Suing real Americans for trying to defend our borders because our own Democrat government would not is an act of war. Stopping us from securing and defending America and our democratic elections is an act of war. Openly saying you'll defy everything Trump does or our president does is an act of war and is literally also dictator-like. LA's installing of sirens to warn of ICE activity is an act of war. Another shutdown yet again, holding us hostage with several acts of war all in one movement. I'm gonna say that's enough. Y'all get the point. I could literally keep going and going. Literally probably hundreds every day, 24/7. It's a new act of war. Something like the mass stuff or the clashes or the assassination attempts or it's just a bunch of BS. The threats, the daily death threats. Y'all want war. You are the party of violence and evil. Y'all want war and you cannot tell me that you don't. Dems are the side of evil and openly anti-American division, war forcing, sabotage, and so much more.